All right, welcome to today's webinar about electrical planning reports. We did do a webinar on this topic for Strata owners about a week ago, and that webinar is recorded. It's on YouTube now. But today's focus is for professionals. So we're going to be talking about electrical planning reports under the Strata Property Act. I think most of you know who VISOA is, the Vancouver Island Strata Owners Association. We're a nonprofit society. We've been around for just over 50 years, and we provide education, support, and advocacy to strata owners all across BC. So today we're going to cover a lot of questions. Some of these things I'll go over quickly. Other things we'll dive deep into. But basically, what is an electrical planning report? Working with stratas who want to obtain one, which stratas have to get it, what's the deadline, if any of you have lived in a strata, can they vote to waive it? Does it have to be updated every few years? The big one, of course, that we're going to talk about mostly today is what's in the report. There's also who can get a short report. You'll find that interesting, I think. Who can write it? How does the strata pay for it? Importantly, who sees it? And just at the very end, we'll tie into what other triggers under the Strata Property Act happen when you have an electrical planning report. So what is it? Clearly, many of the professionals here today have written these types of reports before, but we're going to focus on what it says in the Strata Property Act specifically so that the reports are written to those requirements. So the Strata Property Act applies to all stratas in BC. It doesn't matter if you're 2 units or 200 units. And effective December 6, most stratas in the province are going to have to obtain an electrical planning report. We'll talk about the deadlines in a while. And if you wanted to read more, you could check the Strata Property Amendment Act, which received royal assent on May 11th. And then just this past December, on December 6th, the regulations came out in this order in council. Now, I'm not going to list through all of the parts of the Strata Property Act and the regulations, but if you want to come back to this in the slides or the recording later and read the different sections, these are the numbers that apply. So I know today I'm talking to a lot of people in the electrical industry, engineers, applied science technologists, but there's also a lot of people here from local government, I noticed, and from community associations. A lot of people that I think are in the sustainability part of our world right now. So you're going to be very familiar with this, but anybody who's watching this video who maybe isn't as familiar, the Clean BC Roadmap, as you know, it's telling our province how to shift away from fossil fuels. And I just wanted to highlight the two things that really affect strata owners the most, and that is our space heating and water heating equipment having to be 100% efficient if we buy new equipment after 2030. But also the adoption of electric vehicles, which, as you know, by 2035, we won't be able to buy a gas vehicle. All new vehicles will be zero emissions. So just a high-level overview of an electrical planning report. It's really the first step in this process. They might not realize that they have gas equipment. They might not realize that they won't be able to replace it in 15 years with similar equipment. So this is really about helping them plan for those future changes, whether it's heating, cooling, EV charging, many other mechanical systems that might be there. But this is really to help them understand their needs, their limitations, and potentially what their options are. So it's really to help them take the next steps. I think it's helpful to look at what it's not. It's not a scope of work or a quote. It's not a specific project, and it's not an EV ready plan, which we'll talk about in just a few slides. So for strata owners, it really is a report about what's our current electrical system look like, and that includes both common property and strata lots. What are our anticipated future electrical needs, the limitations of our system, if any, and what measures could we take to reduce capacity? What measures could we take to increase capacity? And then from the owner's point of view, these are laypersons, so this is a resource. This is a resource to educate them and start those discussions among owners about what they think their needs are, what they think their priorities are. Some of our stratas, as you know, were hit very hard with the heat dome, so cooling might be their priority. Other stratas were fine. And maybe their priority is EV charging. Every strata is different. And you probably have heard me say that, but I'm going to say it over and over again. Every strata really is different because there's all sorts of factors, legal, property layout, building, age, all those things that come together that actually create a set of factors that are very unique for each one. So this electrical planning report is really a starting point to plan their future projects. And it's information as well to assist council because they get requests all the time. Can we have a heat pump in our unit? Can I want to install EV charging in my parking stall? And quite honestly, layperson volunteers don't know whether to say yes or no. But they don't have the information in front of them to base those decisions. So the electrical planning report is an important piece to help them have at least some information in front of them to make reasonable decisions when they get requests. So this has been a big question in the last few weeks, is what is the difference between an electrical planning report and an EV ready plan? They're both incredibly valuable reports for planning for the future, but they are quite different if you look at it from the lens of a strata corporation and the lens of strata law. So obviously the electrical planning report is legislated, where the EV ready plan is voluntary. The EPR takes a holistic approach, is looking at the building as a system, whereas the EV ready plan, it might have some of the basic calculations that are the same, but it's taking a narrow approach. It's only planning for future EV charging needs. The electrical planning report is looking at everything, which, as we'll see in today's presentation, is really important. The electrical planning report also takes a lens of options. It's not deciding already what's going to be done. Whereas the EV Ready plan, just because of the way the rebate program is built, it only allows for one solution. So it's making a decision about how to use some of that electrical capacity without necessarily considering all the other things that the strata might need to electrify. In terms of benefits, they're both incredibly beneficial reports. However, every strata is different, and we have over 50% of our stratas in BC are 2 to 4 units, and there's only about 8% of our stratas that are over 80 units. So it really helps you sort of see that not every strata is a good fit for the EV Ready Plan program, whereas the electrical planning report is going to benefit a broad range of stratas. The other thing to keep in mind, which you might not be aware of, is that the strata has to keep quite a few records and documents under the Strata Property Act. There's an incredibly long list of records that we have to keep. It's under Section 35 of the Strata Property Act. And it lists these two things as different legal documents. So the electrical planning report is listed there, but then it also lists as a separate item reports related to EV charging. So this is a really important thing when you're writing these reports, to remember that they are separate. In addition to that, the electrical planning report must be attached to the Form B information certificate, which is a legal document you get when you want to purchase a strata, and it gives you all sorts of information. What's important about this is that that electrical planning report is going to be attached to the Form B information certificate for the next 30 years. So it's a point in time, but it's going to be read by people for decades. So that kind of gives you an idea of what shouldn't be in the report, right? You don't want to put quotes and bids and things in that report. So working with stratas, many of you have worked with stratas, but this is just a great conversation to have, thinking about how a strata works and how they're actually going to use this report. And I'll just say that a lot of depreciation reports, for example, have been done in the last 10 years, put on a shelf and have gathered dust because the owners don't know how to use it. They don't understand it. So here's just a few things to consider when you're writing these. This is new legislation. So strata owners have no idea. They haven't seen examples of these reports. They don't know what they're going to look like, what they're going to say. And many of our strata owners aren't, they haven't had time to go read the Clean BC roadmap. They don't know the goals of the province, whereas you as professionals probably do. A lot of our stratas, we haven't had those conversations yet to talk about, well, what are our future electrical needs? One of the problems with stratas is we can't actually have a long-term plan because every decision is made every year at an annual general meeting. So even if you wanted to have a long-term plan, it can be broken after year 1 or 2. But it's still important for us to have those conversations to start talking about, well, what do we think our needs are? And what do we think we might decide in the future in terms of equipment or systems? As you know, council members are laypersons, they're volunteers. So we can't expect them to have the time or the energy or the expertise to understand technical reports and technical language. The other thing we found in the last few weeks is electrical design is incredibly confusing for townhouse owners and owners in bare land stratas. They typically think that they're getting their electricity independently. Just because they pay a bill to BC Hydro, they don't necessarily understand that their electrical system is a system. They're also, and this isn't your wheelhouse, but they're also unaware of how the electrical planning report is going to trigger other legislation in the Strata Property Act. So that's a learning curve that Visoa is working on, but it's important for you to understand that as well. So what can you do? What can you do to help your client? Or if you're in government and you're building programs, you're helping set up coaches or energy advisors or rebate programs. Here's just some things that you can think about, but definitely for the authors of these reports, please consider offering your services to all types of stratas. Sometimes townhouse and bare land stratas in particular aren't thought of. So, we're not just condo buildings, we're not just high-rise towers. Also, we get a lot of 30-day quotes or 60-day quotes in the strata world, and it's completely unrealistic. The only thing that's going to happen there is that we're going to have to come back to you for another quote 6 or 8 months down the road because now our annual general meeting is coming up. So consider that. Try to give quotes for these reports that have a long time frame for acceptance. Make your clients aware, at least aware of the Clean BC roadmap so they understand what's coming down the road, because these are requirements or going to be requirements when they come into legislation. The other thing is plain language, please. Avoid acronyms because these are just regular people reading the report. If they don't understand it, they're not going to be able to use it, which means that we've lost the entire benefit of these reports. Another thing that a professional told me recently is to use terms consistently or to use terms together. So if something means the same thing, you could say both. And this professional gave an example of, hey, you could say demonstrated load, peak demand at the same time so that they understand different words communicate differently to different people. The other thing is just simple, keep it simple, simple tables, simple graphics if you're including those types of things. And again, keeping the electrical planning report separate. So if you want to put in bids or proposals or other reports, other assessments, keep those separate because again, there's legal reasons to keep them apart. So here's an example of a very simple drawing that was done for my strata where, we said, hey, now we understand why there are 2 green boxes on our property. Most people walk past them every day and never even think about them. But it just illustrates that we've got 4 townhouse blocks, 4 common property electrical rooms, and we now understand that that thing in the roundabout is where the main distribution center is. So your graphics can be very simple but very powerful in communicating to owners what they've got in their electrical system. Probably most importantly is consider how they're going to use these. It's one thing to write the report, but is it going to be helpful to them for the purpose that it was intended for? So we as strata owners rely on expert information. Too often we have council members who come to a meeting and say, oh, I know all of this. Well, they might be incredibly knowledgeable and have tons of experience, but the other owners aren't going to listen to them. What they do listen to is third-party information written by an expert. So these reports are going to be relied on as a solid source of information to help us plan future projects, hopefully to also avoid making decisions in silos. So, rather than jumping into one program to replace heat pumps or one program to put in EV charging, we really want to take that holistic approach and try to encourage stratas to look at everything before they make some of these decisions, because we really want to avoid situations that would force them into a service upgrade later down the road, which of course is not good for the grid. It's not good for the pocketbook. It's definitely not good for the owners getting along in their strata. It will also influence how much we think we need to save, how much we need to put into our contingency reserve fund for some of these projects, just because we didn't realize our electrical system had limitations. So that's an important thing, because we need to start saving now if a boiler upgrade needs to be done in 6 years. It's also going to be used to help councils make decisions. So those owners are coming to us as councils and saying, we want to install EV charging in our parking stall. Well, now there's legislation that sets out a process and a framework for that. And it relies on the fact that the strata council members have an electrical planning report in front of them to help inform them and make informed decisions. So it's important, very important for that part of the Strata Property Act. And as I said, it's also attached to the Form B. So every prospective owner is going to see it. Every current owner is going to see it. It's going to be very helpful. And you can imagine some prospective buyers might decide not to purchase a lot in that strata because there's limitations, because they know they want a heat pump or they know they want EV charging, and they look at this report and they say, oh, well, I'm not confident that I'm going to get those things. I'm going to go buy another strata lot. So you can see just how important decisions are that are being made based on this information. So as I said, it's going to be relied on not just for planning projects, but creating bylaws as well. And our bylaws, of course, set out our policies and our processes, and they have to be in bylaws to be enforceable. But there will also be times where owners want to get approval for certain alterations, and occasionally those have to go to a vote of the owners at a general meeting. There also might be decisions about participating in rebate programs or studies or other types of programs that need to be made by the owners. Keep in mind, most of the time, councils can't make these decisions. They don't have the authority. So most of these decisions are going to go to an annual or a special general meeting. Depending on what the decision is, it's going to require a majority vote or a 3/4 vote. And if the owners don't understand the information in the electrical planning report, they're going to be so confused that they're not going to support these resolutions. So the most important thing is that they understand the limitations of their electrical system. They understand their needs so that they can move forward with their future projects. So which stratas have to get a report? Stratas with fewer than 5 strata lots aren't required. Now, that doesn't mean that they shouldn't get one or that they couldn't get one, but they don't have to. And I've had a few people come to me and say, oh, this only applies to residential stratas. And the answer is no. The Strata Property Act requires all of those stratas of 5 units or more to get an electrical planning report. So that could be any of these types of stratas, residential, industrial, commercial. I mean, we even have stratas that are recreational lots where you pull up your RV in the summer and hook up to services. So stratas come in all shapes and sizes. What's the deadline to get these reports? Pretty simple. If you're in certain districts, Capital Regional District, Fraser Valley District, or Metro Vancouver Regional District, they have to get the report by December 31st, 2026. The only exception is that within those districts, if there's any islands that are only accessible by air or boat, they get an extra 2 years. They get till December 31st, 2028. So for example, if there are islands within the CRD, those islands have extra time. For anybody else in the province, all the stratas, their deadline is December 31st, 2028. Now, what happens if you're a new strata? The strata defines a new strata as any strata where the strata plan was filed at the Land Title Office after December 31st, 2023. And they have 5 years from the date that that strata plan was deposited. New phase stratas generally are on that 5-year deadline as well. But because phase stratas are adding units over time, if anybody is interested in the regs for that, I suggest you read the regulation 5.9. It explains the timing as those units are added. If any of you have lived in a strata, you'll know that we can have a 3/4 vote to waive obtaining a depreciation report. Well, that is not allowed for electrical planning reports. We're simply required to get them. There's no way to defer them or waive them. Similarly, does the report have to be updated every few years? And the answer is no. This is not like a depreciation report in that sense. The Act requires that the Strata Corporation obtain one electrical planning report, but there's no requirement to update them. Now, that doesn't mean that they shouldn't. Obviously, if there's major upgrades, it would actually be a good idea a few years down the road to update the electrical planning report, but they don't have to. And the only exception is, as I said, phase strata. So as they're adding more units, there comes a time where they have to update that report to accommodate the fact that there's more strata lots. And here's the big one. What's in the report? If you go to Strata Property Regulation 511, it lists all the information that has to be in the report. Now, I understand as professionals that the descriptions seem broad and they might not be as specific as you'd like, but let's go through them. The first part is just about you, your name, your qualifications. It also asks your relationship to the strata. You know, are you a strata owner there? That type of thing. It's asking for the current capacity of the strata's electrical system. And here I'll mention that I don't have the exact words from the regulations because it's too long, but this is just a summary. Then it asks for the existing demands on the system. And because I use this slide for strata owners, it just lists a few examples of the types of mechanical equipment that might be there. What is the current peak demand? What is the spare capacity? What is an estimate of the electrical capacity that would be needed to power systems that are currently powered by an energy source other than electricity? So of course, the example that I'm giving strata owners is you have a gas boiler and you won't be able to buy a new one. So you're going to have some sort of electrical system to heat your building. And this is a tough one for you, an estimate of the electrical capacity needed for any other anticipated future demands. So that could be adding systems, it could be modifying systems. I leave it to your professional assessments of what those things might be. Then there's also what steps could you include in the report and suggest that the strata might be able to practically take to reduce demands. So whether that's upgrading lighting to LED or some other efficiency, again, that's up to you to decide. Are there opportunities here? Are there options that the strata might have to help reduce demands? The opposite, of course, is upgrades or modifications. Is there anything that the strata could practically do to increase the capacity? We've had some questions about solar power. We've had some questions about service upgrades. So again, this is up to you as the author to decide, are there, what would the options be if they needed to increase capacity? And then whether you're reducing capacity or increasing capacity, what's the estimate of the electrical capacity that would be made available if the strata took those steps? So I can imagine you're already thinking, oh my goodness, this language is not specific. So we see that language in the regulations, an estimate of capacity or the steps that a strata could practically take. It's not making decisions. You're not asking the strata to decide, we want this heat pump system or we want this boiler replaced. So this is up to you how you want to write it, but you might end up using language like you could free up the capacity in the range of this, or based on similar buildings, their air makeup units use, this much capacity. It's up to you, and I know that you all have professional standards. So you're all likely to do this a little bit differently. There is no template, there is no standard for this. It all relies on you as the author to interpret this. But just keep in mind, it's not asking you for full electrical design of an EV charging system. It's not asking you to choose what equipment would replace that boiler and look at the specifics of that piece of equipment. This is a high level general overview just to give the stratas that picture of what are our needs, what's our current, what are our needs, what are our limitations, and are there any options that we could consider? And then as the strata has those discussions and makes those decisions, it's up to them to contact a professional to get more information when the project's time. So if they go to replace that boiler, they should be contacting you, or they should be contacting a mechanical engineer or a structural engineer if it's going to change something on the roof. It's up to them to contact those professionals at that time of the project and plan that project in detail. The electrical planning report is not the time for that level of detail. So then we get to which stratas can get a short report. And boy, did this confuse our strata owners when we tried to explain it. But basically, I'm going to jump to the next slide because you're professionals who understand electricity. What the regulation says is, if each strata lot in the strata plan is supplied with electricity by a utility independently from each other strata lot, the planning report only needs these two things. It needs the name and qualifications again of the author, but then it just needs a statement that says each strata lot is supplied by electricity by a utility independently from each other strata lot. So I will leave that to you to explain to your client. But basically, it's trying to take into the account that you don't have to do all of those other things in the regulations because they don't apply to this strata. Everybody's got their power from the utility independently. So who can write these reports? It's very clear in the Act. For all stratas, can hire an electrical engineer or an applied science technologist. If the buildings are all Part 9 buildings, then they also have the option of a licensed electrician, but they can still have an engineer, applied science technologist, or a combination. I've already seen some contractors working together. So an engineer with oversight of the boots on the ground people. But just know that it would, in that case, it would be the engineer that the strata is obtaining the report from. So it's the engineer's name and qualifications that are going to be on there. Now, you all know what a Part 9 building is, but for anybody watching this video later, I've left in a couple of slides that just give a really high level, trying to help a strata owner understand what a Part 9 building is. But again, that's just for the purposes of knowing who can write your report under the Strata Property Act. What we found is that a lot of strata owners who live in townhouses and bare land stratas think that their electrical systems are very simple. So on a very high level, we've tried to explain that just because you think it's simple doesn't mean that your electrical design is simple, and that the distribution can actually be quite complex when you're in a townhouse development or a bare land strata. So this is just very quick because you're not living in the strata, but how can the strata pay for the report? They can do it one of two ways: in their annual operating budget or their contingency reserve fund. What's important for you as a contractor or service provider to know is that these decisions can't be made on the spot, which is why I said having quotes that are 30 or 60 days just don't work. Our annual general meetings are once a year, and we rarely have special general meetings. The reason for that is it sometimes costs thousands of dollars for a strata to hold a special general meeting during the year. So it's generally reserved for times that are, large projects. For the electrical planning report, I suggest that you give quotes and allow them enough time so that they have time to have these votes at their general meetings and either approve their operating budget or approve the expenditure from the contingency reserve fund. Again, so who sees the report? It's going to be seen by the strata owners, the council, the strata manager, if they have one. It's really for the benefit of all the owners. It's not submitted to any authority. It's not submitted to government. But as I said, it must be attached to these Form B information certificates, and the records have to be kept forever. So these are going to be records of the Strata Corporation for a long time. And then the last thing I just wanted to say, and this gets really into the strata legislation, but there is a triggering effect to the electrical planning report in terms of when an owner comes to council and says, I want to pay, I want to install, to put in all the infrastructure, to put in an EV charging station in my stall. And this is when there's no EV ready stalls. This is just more those one-offs for the owners, like, okay, the strata's not putting in the system, I want to put in a charging station myself. So that's considered an alteration under the strata bylaws and the Strata Property Act. So there is a process now there's a brand new section of the Strata Property Act. It's sections 90.1 to 90.3, and this is what it's called. But basically, the electrical planning report is sort of a phased step. This piece of legislation allows a certain amount of time. Remember those deadlines of 2026 and 2028. It allows that much time for the strata to get their electrical planning report. And then this section kicks in, which is basically like a right to charge. If the owner comes and says, I want to do this, the council can't unreasonably refuse. But this section for the owners doesn't kick in until the electrical planning report is received or the deadline to get it has passed. So as professionals, if you're getting requests from individual owners, this is maybe something to keep in mind. So once this section has kicked in, the council, like I said, they can't unreasonably deny, but they also have to consider that request from the owner within 3 months, and they can require the owner to pay all the expenses and agree in writing. They can also, if the parking stall is common property, it's not exclusive use on the registered strata plan. If it's common property and it's being assigned by council, they can assign that stall for up to 5 years now. Okay, well, that brings us to the end. So thank you all for attending today. It was great to see you, and have a super day.